A shocking social justice story of how an HOA tried to find an elderly man until they realized he built the entire neighborhood. They thought he was just an old man with an overgrown yard. They thought he'd back down when they slapped him with fines. But what they didn't know was that he built the very neighborhood they were trying to police. What started as a petty HOA violation turned into a fight for justice, uncovering long-buried secrets, crooked leadership, and a paper trail someone would kill to destroy. If you think homeowners associations are just about grass height and mailboxes, think again. Because by the time this story is over, you'll realize. Some rules were made to protect a community. Others were made to control it. And when they picked a fight with Elijah Brooks, they chose the wrong man. Stay locked until the end, because this story is about more than HOA drama. It's about legacy, truth, and the danger of rewriting history. It came tucked in a plain white envelope, bearing the stamp of the Rosebend Hills Homeowners Association, delivered with the cold precision of a speeding ticket. 81-year-old Elijah Brooks sat at his kitchen table, his fingers trembling only slightly as he slid the notice from the paper. You are hereby notified that the overgrown vines on your rear fence and unauthorized modifications to your front porch violate Rosebend Hills HOA community standards. You have 10 days to comply or face a fine of $500 per infraction. He let out a quiet chuckle. Not because it was funny, but because it was so boldly ridiculous. Unauthorized modifications? The vines in question? Jasmine, planted by his wife Lillian before her passing. The porch? He built it himself. Before there was an HOA. Before the gates, before the manicured lawns, before Rosebend Hills was even named. He folded the letter calmly and placed it next to a cup of untouched coffee. Outside, birds chirped, and a lawn sprinkler ticked in the neighbor's yard. It was just another morning. Until now. HOA President Trent Mallory, 36, was all polish and policy. A real estate agent turned community leader, he ran the neighborhood board like a private company, and saw Elijah Brooks' home as a problem. It's dragging down the vibe, he said at the last board meeting, flipping through a slideshow of aesthetic concerns. Elijah's porch was slide 5. He refuses to download the HOA app, doesn't use the approved garbage bins, and still hand waters his lawn. It's not 1985 anymore. Funny, someone mumbled. That's the year the neighborhood was founded. Trent didn't hear, or pretended not to. We can't play favorites. He gets a warning like everyone else. What he didn't know was that Elijah wasn't just in the neighborhood in 1985. He was the reason it existed at all. Elijah's granddaughter Nia, a second-year law student, read the violation letter aloud. This is ridiculous. Want me to help draft a legal response? No, Elijah said, eyes steady. Let them come. You sure? She asked. He nodded slowly, then stood and walked to the hallway. With quiet reverence, he opened a door that hadn't been touched in months, a home office, lined with faded photographs and dusty blueprints. There, in a large black frame, was a picture of Elijah from 40 years ago, shovel in hand, surrounded by construction crews on red Georgia clay. A sign behind him read, Future site of Rosebend Hills, founded 1985. He pointed. That's the day I broke ground on this neighborhood. Nia blinked. Wait. Grandpa, you founded Rosebend Hills? I was one of 5 who developed the land, drafted the original charters, and designed the first homes, including this one. Then why are they treating you like this? He smiled bitterly. Because when you build something good, someone always shows up later trying to take it over. 2 days later, a white SUV pulled up to Elijah's driveway. Out stepped Trent, phone in hand, snapping pictures of Elijah's porch like it was a crime scene. Excuse me, Elijah said, stepping outside. Need help with something? I'm here on behalf of the HOA, Trent said. You were issued a notice. I got your notice, Elijah replied. But I'm afraid you're mistaken. I'm afraid you're out of compliance, Trent snapped. Those vines were planted by my wife. In 1987. That porch. I built it in 86. Long before your little handbook was printed. That may be, but the current board enforces today's standards. Elijah stepped closer. And what if I told you I wrote the first bylaws? That I'm one of the original founders of Rosebend Hills, and I still have the paperwork to prove it? For the first time, Trent hesitated. That doesn't change the current policies. Oh, it changes everything, Elijah said. Because I still own a share in the founding trust. And that gives me more say than anyone on your board. Later that night, Nia was scrolling through old county records online when something caught her eye. Elijah's name listed on every foundational document, zoning meetings, planning approvals, early infrastructure contracts. She found a scanned deed labeled Elijah James Brooks, co-founder and primary landholder, Rosebend Development Incorporated. "Grandpa," she whispered, "you didn't just help. You were the HOA." He smiled faintly. "That's what they're afraid of." At dawn, Elijah went out to collect the newspaper. Inside his mailbox, wedged between bills and catalogs, was a folded envelope. No stamp. No return address. Just one sentence typed neatly in the center of the page. "Stop digging into the past, or someone might get hurt." He stared at it for a long time. Then, without flinching, he handed it to Nia. "They're scared," she whispered. He nodded. "Good. That means the truth still matters. What do we do now?" Elijah walked inside, opened an old filing cabinet, and pulled out a yellowing binder titled, "Founding Records, Rosebend Hills." "We fight," he said. "And we start by reminding them who built this place." But as they sat down to prepare for battle, they didn't realize someone had already started erasing the past. The air in the Whispering Pines boardroom was stifling, thick with the scent of coffee, ego, and freshly printed bylaws. At the head of the long mahogany table sat HOA President Vanessa Creighton, blonde bob sharp as her tone, her pearl earrings glinting under fluorescent lights. She tapped her manicured nails against the agenda packet. "We need to make an example out of him," she said, voice crisp and cold. "If we let one homeowner slide, the rest will follow." The board murmured in agreement. "He's already late on his dues, and those solar panels violate 4 of our architectural standards," added board member Rick Dorsey, smirking as he scrolled through photos on his tablet. "And don't get me started on that wildflower garden. Looks like a jungle." Vanessa's lip curled. "This neighborhood has standards. We're not running a nature preserve." They all chuckled. All except one, Lena Garcia, the newest board member, barely 6 weeks in, still holding onto her conscience like a life raft in stormy waters. "Wait," she said, glancing between them, "this is about Mr. Elijah, right?" "Yes," Vanessa said, not missing a beat. "The man's 90, Lena said. He's a veteran. His house is the cleanest on the block." Vanessa rolled her eyes. "Age doesn't exempt you from the rules. We don't run on nostalgia, we run on order." Rick chimed in. "And fines. Don't forget the fines." The group laughed again. But Lena wasn't laughing. Back at 213 Oakwood Lane, Elijah sat quietly on his porch swing, the creak of the chain in rhythm with the wind. He stared out at the HOA citation notice pinned to his mailbox with tape, bold red letters across the top, "Second notice, violation pending legal action." He sighed, his fingers brushing across the faded brass plaque embedded in the porch column. Whispering Pines Founding Committee, EST 1983. His name was first on the list. He shook his head and slowly stood, using his cane to steady himself. Something was wrong, more than just the fines or the threats. The neighborhood didn't just forget him. It was like they wanted him gone. He walked inside and unlocked the bottom drawer of his study desk. Inside was a manila folder. Whispering Pines' original deed charter. He pulled out the original documents, deeds, maps, and a signed founding charter with his initials across every page. These weren't just papers, they were his legacy. And they had the power to shake this HOA to its core. Later that evening, Lena parked 2 blocks away and walked the rest of the way to Elijah's home under cover of dusk. She knocked twice. "Miss Garcia?" Elijah said, surprised but composed. "Didn't expect you." "Hi. I needed to see you," she said, voice hushed. "I think something's going on. Vanessa and Rick, this isn't about solar panels or gardens. They're digging into your property records. Something about redevelopment deals with the developer, Silverstone Properties." Elijah's face hardened. "I thought I recognized that name," he murmured. "They've been circling this area for years. Whispering Pines is one of the last debt-free communities in the county." Lena nodded. "They want to turn this whole place into a private gated complex. Kick out the legacy residents, raise the dues, build high-end rentals. And they need me gone," Elijah finished, Because I'm the last original deed holder who never signed over HOA zoning rights. Lena gasped. You're the holdout. I'm the founder, he corrected. And they don't know that, yet. Meanwhile, in a downtown law office, Vanessa sat across from a well-dressed man in a slick suit, Devin Reyes, VP of Development for Silverstone Properties. The old man's putting up resistance, Vanessa said. We're hitting him with fines, violations, scare tactics. But he's not budging. Devin leaned back in his chair, steepling his fingers. I thought you said this would be easy. It was supposed to be. Then make it easy. Accelerate the liens. Push legal action. If he can't pay, the house goes into foreclosure, and we move in. And if he does fight back? Devin smiled, thin and cold. Then we bury him in paperwork until he doesn't have the strength to keep going. But Elijah wasn't folding. He mailed certified copies of his original founding documents to the county records office and called in a favor from his late wife's cousin, retired Judge Harold Simmons. Harold, Elijah said over the phone, I might need you to remind these folks who built this neighborhood from the ground up. You just say the word, the judge replied. And I'll be on your porch with a gavel and a witness list. 2 nights later, Lena returned to Elijah's home, but something was different. The porch light was off. The door was cracked. She stepped inside. Elijah? No answer. She moved cautiously through the living room. Papers were scattered. The drawer that held the deed folder was yanked out, contents gone. A window in the kitchen had been shattered from the outside. She found Elijah's phone on the ground. The screen flashed, missed call, Harold Simmons. And a single message, unsent in the drafts folder. If anything happens to me, look in the attic. The truth is hidden there. Lena's heart pounded. A distant noise creaked from upstairs. She grabbed the phone, backing toward the front door. But before she could exit, a hand grabbed her shoulder. The grip on Lena's shoulder was firm but not aggressive, yet in that moment, adrenaline surged like a flood through her body. She spun around, her breath caught in her throat. Elijah, she gasped. He was standing behind her, disheveled but breathing, his plaid shirt dusty, a gash across his right brow slowly dripping blood. I thought you were, she stammered. Hurt? Almost, Elijah rasped, clutching his side. Someone was waiting outside. I heard glass break, hiding in the crawlspace beneath the porch. They didn't see me. But they took something. Lena helped him to the couch. You need a hospital. I need to be heard, Elijah said. They're trying to erase me. But the truth is upstairs. Together, they climbed to the attic, a tight, creaking staircase that hadn't been touched in years. Dust hung in the air like fog. Lena reached up, tugged the cord, and the single light bulb flickered to life. Stacks of boxes. Military medals. A rusted trunk. And beneath a faded quilt, a steel lockbox. Elijah bent down, unlocking it with a key around his neck. Inside were original community maps, hand-drawn zoning codes, receipts of founding dues, every paper from Whispering Pines' genesis. But one document stood out. An envelope. Sealed with wax. Addressed to future leadership of Whispering Pines HOA. Elijah opened it with trembling hands. Inside was a signed letter of intent, dated 1983, notarized and witnessed by the original 5 founders, including Elijah, explicitly limiting the HOA's ability to alter land zoning, raise dues beyond inflation, or sell to outside developers without unanimous consent of the founding deed holders. And Elijah? He was the last one alive. This, Lena whispered, eyes scanning the letter. This changes everything. The next day, Vanessa Creighton stood at the front of the HOA's emergency meeting with a confident smirk. We've officially filed the 3rd lien, she announced. Once it processes, we initiate foreclosure. He'll have 30 days to vacate. Rick clapped. Silverstone's gonna be thrilled. But before Vanessa could soak in her victory, the door to the meeting room creaked open. Elijah walked in, slow but steady, flanked by Lena and retired Judge Harold Simmons. Gasps spread through the room like wildfire. What is the meaning of this? Vanessa snapped. Judge Simmons stepped forward. This is a legal declaration of cease and desist. Effective immediately, all fines, liens, and pending actions against Mr. Elijah Watkins are to be nullified on grounds of fraud, harassment, and breach of the original HOA charter. He dropped the envelope onto the conference table with a dramatic thud. The founding charter clearly states that no changes to community policy, including resale, redevelopment, or financial penalty structures, can occur without consent from all founding deed holders. Mr. Watkins is the last surviving founder. The room fell into stunned silence. Vanessa's face was drained of color. "This isn't possible," she whispered. "I built this neighborhood," Elijah said, voice hoarse but resolute. "From the dirt roads to the park benches. I planted the first tree and laid the first brick on the community center. I didn't give my life to see it sold off like a cheap timeshare. You can't just waltz in here and reverse policy." Rick shouted. "I can," Judge Simmons said, stepping closer. "And I just did. Unless you'd like to see how the County Superior Court feels about corporate collusion between an HOA board and a private developer." Elijah handed Vanessa a single sheet of paper. "My resignation," she sneered. "No," Elijah said. "Your audit notice." Outside the HOA office, Lena leaned against the railing, eyes scanning the quiet street. "You just shook the tree," she said to Elijah. "Hard. I planted that tree," he replied with a faint smile. "And I'm not done shaking." As the sun dipped below the horizon, a car idled across the street, unmarked, tinted windows, engine purring like a watchful predator. Elijah noticed. So did Lena. "They're still watching," she whispered. "They're afraid," Elijah said. "That means we're doing something right." Later that night, Elijah sat at his desk, flipping through the remaining pages from the lockbox. One folder had a tab labeled Watkins vs. Hawkins, 1992. Lena noticed. "What's that?" He paused. "The lawsuit that nearly tore this community apart." As he opened the file, his eyes narrowed. Inside were newspaper clippings, legal memos, and a name that stopped Lena cold. Devin Reyes. "You recognize it?" Elijah asked. "That's the guy from Silverstone. Vanessa met with him." Elijah stared at a 1992 court document listing Devin Reyes not as a developer, but as a junior attorney for Hawkins and Brooks, the same firm accused of trying to illegally annex land in Whispering Pines back then. "He's been after this place for decades," Elijah said slowly. "And now he's back, with money, power, and a board full of people willing to sell out." "And what about the others?" Lena asked. "What about Rick? And the zoning board? How deep does it go?" Elijah didn't answer. He just pulled out an old cassette tape, labeled in fading pen. "Board meeting, July 10th, 1992, confidential." He inserted it into an old tape deck. Static crackled. Then a voice, clear, cold, unmistakable. "Let him take the fall. Watkins will never know. Once the redevelopment deal goes through, we'll be rich." Lena froze. "That's Rick's voice," she whispered. And then, a knock at the front door. 3 slow taps. Then silence. Elijah motioned for Lena to stay quiet as he peeked through the curtain. Nobody on the porch. But on the doormat, a manila envelope. No return address. He picked it up. Opened it. Inside, a photo of Lena. A photo of Elijah. And a single message typed in all caps. "Stay out of it or you'll join the rest." The morning air over Meadow Creek buzzed, not with birdsong, but with whispers. After Mr. Otis' shocking revelation at the HOA meeting, word spread like wildfire. Some residents were in awe. Others were angry. Not at the HOA, but at Otis. Accusations of fraud. Rumors that he faked the documents. Even a whisper that he was just an old man chasing ghosts. But Otis didn't flinch. He'd weathered storms before. This time, though, he wasn't going to do it alone. Across town, Linda Washington sat at her kitchen table, surrounded by her father's old documents, HOA maps, bylaws, founding charters. She hadn't been back to her family's old home since her father passed, but something about Otis stirred a memory. A name. A signature. She picked up an old letter. Dated 1982. To the future residents of Meadow Creek, let this place be a refuge, not just of beauty, but of justice. Otis M. Langston. Her fingers trembled. She had heard the name before, but had never connected it to this Otis. The one the HOA had just tried to silence. She grabbed her phone. "Mr. Otis, it's Linda. You need to see what I found." Otis met her at a local diner, the same booth he'd been using for years. Linda slid a yellowed file folder across the table. He opened it slowly, eyes softening as he saw his old penmanship staring back at him. His bylaws. His vision. His dream for Meadow Creek. Otis' voice caught. I wrote this before the first home was ever built. Before the board turned it into a machine. Linda leaned forward. Mr. Otis, what they're doing now, none of this follows your charter. They've rewritten the entire structure. The way they've handled fines? Illegal. You could sue. He looked down at the papers, then back at her. They didn't just rewrite my words. They buried them. Back at the HOA office, Chairwoman Denise Carr paced her office. The panic from the last meeting hadn't worn off. That man, Otis, he knew too much. She picked up the phone. Get me Rick, she snapped. Rick, the HOA's legal counsel, had been on retainer for years. A former real estate lawyer with a habit of finding loopholes and silencing dissenting voices with dense paperwork. We've got a problem, she hissed when he answered. Langston has old documents, original bylaws. Rick paused. That might actually be a bigger problem than I thought. What do you mean? There's something you never asked about, Rick said cautiously. The land deed. What about it? If his name is on it, and he never relinquished rights formally, he may technically still have legal control over certain foundational elements of the HOA. Denise's heart dropped. What are our options? Rick sighed. We need to shut him down fast. Discredit him. Or make sure no one believes him. Back at Otis' home, Linda and Otis had gotten to work. Every drawer, every file, every dusty cabinet now sat open, papers sorted on the dining room table like a crime board. Tax filings. Deeds. HOA voting logs. Even photos of the original board, smiling, young, and idealistic. Linda stopped at one photo. Who's this guy? She asked. Otis leaned over. That's Gregory Pierce, treasurer of the first board. And Denise Carr's father. Linda's eyebrows shot up. Wait. She inherited her position? Otis nodded. Not officially. But when he passed, she slowly started taking over responsibilities. Claimed she wanted to honor his legacy. Linda scoffed. By turning a community into a cash cow. Otis picked up another document. And here's the kicker. Look at this. It was a vote log. 23 names. But 12 were crossed out. They removed 12 original votes illegally. Rewrote the bylaws in a midnight meeting without community notice. That's voter fraud, Linda whispered. Otis looked up. And it gets worse. Look at the names of the crossed-out voters. Linda's eyes widened. They're all black or Latino homeowners. The realization sank in like a stone. This wasn't just about power. It was about erasure. Linda stood up. We have to go public. A press release. A community town hall. Something. Otis nodded slowly. We'll need backup. They contacted a local journalist, Rosa Delgado, a reporter who had built a reputation on exposing institutional corruption in small towns. When she read the documents, she said only 4 words. This story has legs. By nightfall, she had uploaded a teaser online. Is your HOA hiding its history? One elderly man fights back. The post went viral by morning. Meanwhile, at the HOA office, Denise's phone exploded with calls. Emails. Media requests. Then came the letter. Delivered by hand. Legal header. Signed by an attorney. Otis was filing an injunction. Not just against Denise, but the entire HOA board. On grounds of fraud, voter suppression, financial mismanagement, and constitutional violations of property rights. The community lit up. Some supported Otis openly. Others stayed silent, afraid of retaliation. And then, someone broke into Otis' home. Linda arrived first the next morning. The front door, ajar. Files, tossed. Cabinets, smashed. Every document they'd sorted, gone. Otis sat on the floor, shaken but unharmed. I heard them. I couldn't stop them, he whispered. Linda's jaw tightened. They're scared. That means we're close. But just as she dialed 911, her phone buzzed with a new message. A photo. Of her car. parked in front of Otis' home. Captioned, "Back off, or we come for both of you next." She stared at Otis. "They're watching us." Otis stood, voice steady now. "Then let them. We're not backing down." That night, Rosa calls Otis in a panic. She's found something in the HOA's financial reports. A series of payments marked as maintenance consulting fees, but going to a shell company. And the person listed on the articles of incorporation? Linda's father. But he died years ago. Didn't he? The tension in the Briarwood Hollow HOA boardroom was suffocating. Every chair around the long mahogany table was filled, not with concerned homeowners, but with grim-faced board members, each bracing for a confrontation they didn't fully understand. At the head sat Cameron Slade, arms crossed, gaze burning through every person present. Behind him stood a small army: Marie, his loyal friend and longtime community member; Marcus, the retired civil rights attorney now acting as his counsel; and several residents who had quietly supported him through the chaos. They weren't just here for moral support. They were here to change the fate of their community. Cameron's presence alone was enough to shift the energy in the room. He wore a charcoal gray blazer over his World War II veteran cap, and despite his age, stood taller than most in the room, his spine forged not by pride, but by principle. He tapped a folder against the table. "Before we begin, I suggest no one lie to me. I've come prepared." Sylvia Granger, the HOA president, laughed nervously. "Mr. Slade, this is highly irregular. If you feel you've been fined in error, there's a formal appeal." "I helped draft those appeals procedures in 1998, Cameron said, voice calm, unshaken. "Before you ever sat on this board. In fact, before most of you even moved into Briarwood Hollow." That shut her up. Sylvia blinked, uncertain. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying," he said, placing the folder down and flipping it open, "that I'm not just a resident here. I'm the founder of this community association. I helped build this neighborhood, brick by brick, law by law. And I have the paperwork to prove it." Gasps echoed around the room. A few board members exchanged anxious glances. Cameron lifted the original HOA charter, signed and notarized, with his name in bold as the first founding signatory. The document was pristine, sealed in a protective sleeve, but decades old. Sylvia's voice cracked. "That can't be. I started this HOA with 4 other residents in 1986. I wrote the original bylaws, including the clauses about fair governance, homeowner protections, and anti-discrimination rules, ones that your board has conveniently ignored." Marie stepped forward, setting down a second folder. "Over the last 6 months, your board has levied over $34,000 in illegal fines," she said. "Most of them targeted longtime residents, especially elderly ones, many of whom are Black or Latino. We have statements from 14 of them, plus the financial records." She opened the folder. Inside, spreadsheets, statements, and receipts, painstakingly compiled, documented, and cross-referenced. Marcus added, "We've also filed a formal complaint with the State HOA Oversight Board. And we've brought in the press." At that, the door opened. A journalist from the local paper stepped in quietly, camera in hand. Sylvia leapt from her seat. "This is a private meeting." "No," Cameron said. "This is a community reckoning. And the community deserves transparency." Robert Keene, one of the more senior board members, swallowed hard. "Cameron, if what you're saying is true, then we need to make this right." "You don't need to make it right," Cameron said. "You need to step down." Sylvia bristled. "You don't have the authority to call for that." Cameron's eyes narrowed. Section 4.2 of the founding bylaws, still legally binding, states that if any board member is found to be acting in violation of fair housing laws or engaging in targeted discrimination, the founding chair can call for a vote of removal. And I am still that founding chair, whether you knew it or not. He turned to the board members. "Let's take the vote. Now." They hesitated. But one by one, hands slowly rose. First Robert. Then Miriam. Then Theo. And finally, after a long, tense silence, even Sylvia's hand trembled upward. It was unanimous. Sylvia sat back down, pale and speechless. Cameron nodded. "Effective immediately, this board is dissolved. New elections will be held in 30 days. Until then, an interim committee made up of founding members and nominated residents will oversee operations. No more bullying. No more shady fines. Cheers erupted from the hallway outside, where residents had been quietly listening. Tears streamed down Marie's face. As the crowd flooded into the room, Cameron was nearly knocked over by hugs and handshakes from neighbors, some he hadn't spoken to in years, others he'd never met. "Thank you," one woman whispered. "I was going to lose my home." "You saved us," said another. Marcus clapped a hand on his shoulder. "You just reminded them who they were messing with." Cameron gave a tired smile. "I didn't save anyone. I just remembered what this neighborhood was supposed to be." Outside, the spring breeze rustled the cherry blossoms lining Briarwood Hollow. The sun had finally broken through the gray clouds overhead. It was peaceful again. For the first time in a long time. As Cameron stepped outside with Marie, the journalist approached him with a grin. "Sir, what's the one thing you want people to take from this?" Cameron looked down the quiet, sunlit street. Then he answered, slow and steady, "That no matter how old you are, how tired, or how underestimated, you can still shake the ground beneath injustice. Even if it takes 40 years. The reporter nodded, visibly moved. Marie chuckled. "You know, I think we ought to rename the clubhouse after you." Cameron smirked. "Nah. Just make sure they finally fix the cracks in the sidewalk. That was in the budget 20 years ago." Victory. Justice served. But the fight for fairness never ends.